Sup everybody, this is Carrick with ACG and it's my continuing open world adventure to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today's title is the 1988 Mos Eisley simulator known as Yakuza 0 for PS4 from Sega, out the 24th of January. There truly is no greater hive of scum and villainy, and lo and behold you get to take part in it in this prequel to the Yakuza titles. Now you still play as Kazuma Kiryu and another character that, since it might be considered a spoiler, I won't name here, but they are a massive part of this title. Let's see if Sega origin story is sort of like Iron Man, a robust intro into a beloved franchise, or if it's X-Men Origins Wolverine, a product so bad its participants keep thinking they need to friggin' apologize for it. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Yakuza 0, the world's oldest looking 20-year-old, WWE create-a-character NPCs, and Wayne Newton bad guys. Graphics are up first. I think it's fitting that the first thing you see in Yakuza 0 is somebody dying, because perceptions of past Yakuza games can die here as well, including the fact that many times the main characters look like they were printed from the world's first 3D printer at like 7 DPI resolution. And here the bump in scale is instantly noticeable, with highly detailed facial textures and models getting a significant enough bump that occasionally you think you might get sucked into a character's facial pores. Even if the hilarity of some of the battle animations continues, overall the increase in fidelity is instantly noticeable and measurable between the titles now and the prior ones. Like the first time you get into a fight with 3 street hoods, all obviously incapable of sensing danger, so they attack the stoic, walking all by himself, obviously afraid of nothing main character. Yeah, it's pretty much like someone poking a taller version of Mike Tyson, calling him stupid and then being surprised by what happens next. Almost instantly shit hits the fan with interactions across the board with the game, the character, and the level, as our hero basically superhero slams the shit out of everyone, slamming car doors on faces, mashing people into screaming paste on walls, and all the while debris in various parts of the game world moving and swirling and shifting around you. Combat is just spectacular, and though the lack of true fidelity in combat does hurt it from time to time, and I'll discuss that in a second, there's just something beautiful about lifting an enemy off their feet and turning them into the world's first terrestrial asteroid, slamming them down into the earth like you're trying to add mass. Now the physicality of all, depending on the fight stance you choose, is actually excellent, and in fact, fighting as a whole is, including the large number of animations across the pedestrians watching you. Now sadly that's not mimicked in places like dance clubs, where many times all the characters will be looped into the same dance animation, resulting in one of the scariest mass puppet pop-it dance-offs that you're ever going to see. Now it can certainly be argued that many of the prior titles had these elements, and they have, but it's the layering of them, of the movement and the texture, that seem just higher here, resulting in a world that feels far more lifelike. For example, walking along the busy street, the interactions of the NPCs is of a much higher caliber than most games display, though to be fair, this game is using a smaller location, but it's packed with detail, from haphazard bike racks to couples fighting realistically on the street, pulling one another toward different desired destinations, to even people randomly practicing golf swings or discussing the finer points of fashion. While not perfect, there are very few games that feel as alive as this one does, when it's working well. Sadly, not everything is perfect here. For example, pathing for characters in the game world ranges from okay to absolutely fucking atrocious, with people sticking on you, standing on your feet like there's some kind of prom date that's too short, or meandering around in general circles until they magically decide to move a certain way. Also, there's an annoying amount of level of detail pop-in that can be seen at times with entire outside structures like signs or decorations popping into view alarmingly close. Honestly, where Yakuza hits on all its corrupt and diabolical cylinders is when it's awash in the high-moneyed sweetness of the little location in 1988 Tokyo where everybody was just swimming in cash like Scrooge McDucks. While not perfect, there are a countless number of times where the game world will have you speechless. Sound, music, and voice.
なもう一発のヤクザだ。今日の取り立てももう済ませたんだろ。まあな。これで風間のおやっさんも少し安心するか。
And of course, sound is up first. It's excellent, from the whir of weird claw arms coming down to catch that one Fantasy Zone character, to the excellent surround effects as a nighttime arcade filters into your hearing as you round a corner. Excellent sound throughout, and even when the thick of things is occurring, almost nothing crowds up on the audio spectrum, and there's absolutely no crunch to be noticed at all. Now, when in battle, various hits all have that typical high fructose corn syrup sound to them, which is more cartoonish than concussive, but I think that's fine. The game's continual aim towards small bits of comedy work well with that delineation. If there's any real true complaint I have, it's the continued looping of crowd noise that can get infuriating, especially when we run smack dab down Ghostbuster Alley, where an empty alley keeps playing the same busy town center musical prompt, resulting in somehow Yakuza being a horror game for about 35 seconds until you figure out what just happened. Odd little mistakes here and there do occur, but overall, pretty good. And that, of course, brings us to music. This is pretty good, and while it's not the typical over-the-top theatrical affair some might expect from an open neighborhood game like this, what it does well with more arcadey loops and tracks that really reminisce through Sega's history, especially during battles, with the various groups inhabiting your section of Tokyo, even to the more subdued layered musical tracks that you hear during some poignant moments. The game does love its negative space, though, and you're going to be hard-pressed to find a 10-minute block where the music doesn't just cut off and let the game revel in sound design, or a strange moment between two men who keep taking their shirts off. It's pretty good. And that, of course, brings us to voice. This is one of those times where excellence can actually cost you in many other places. For example, when in the major cutscenes and telling larger stories, the voice work is excellent, with the breathy remains of crying still sticking into later sentences during emotional bits. It really removes the oddness we sometimes get in games where a character appears like they have emotional ADHD, pissed and throwing tantrums 1 second, demurely drinking a drink the next, and then laughing like a goddamn crazy person the very next. Here, many voices carry the emotion throughout the scene, and it always shows excellent voice direction. Sadly, the game is absolutely chock full of unvoiced moments, and reading paragraphs of writing with only the occasional mysterious and slightly sensual grunt of the protagonist feels completely threadbare, especially next to the context of those larger cutscenes. About the time I was finishing a mini-quest about girls selling their underwear to perverts, and a buyer, flush absolutely with excitement over his excellent purchase, decided to kidnap the seller, I knew I liked the voiceover. Sadly, the game is replete with those times where there is no voice, and that really does hurt it. And of course, that brings us to gameplay. And a bit about the story. This is 1988, prior to the other titles, and you get to see how the protagonists become legends in their own right, playing through a bit of their known but not fully fleshed out history from the other games. And I have to say, while delivered at times in incredibly stilted fashion, it's actually still a pretty goddamn cool story nonetheless, involving honor, backstabbing, and pretty much everything else you would expect from, well, a life as a gangsta. As the story progresses, the fate of many characters change, and as with most of the Yakuza games, it's about how the new situations unfold with continued character growth that is really interesting to me. Sadly, the pacing is like bad parenting, ironclad attention at times, and then other times disappearing for like 2 weeks while leaving you with a 5 spot to buy some Wonder Bread. Some chapters tell you exactly where to go and have no flexibility whatsoever, including going left to a taxi that's like 20 feet away when the game wants you to go to a taxi that's to the right 19 blocks away for no other reason, even a cutscene, while other chapters have you go hog wild, leaving you with nothing but the barest of instructions. It's that ramrod directing that gets the story set up, though, and introduces you to the many locations and extra layers of gameplay that Yakuza 0 has, and it's also that lackadaisical direction that can have you feeling a little bit handcuffed. You may want to do some mini games or engage in some activities you've recently found, but it could easily be hours until you're able to do so, especially if you're watching the story. Or you may want to further the story, having your fill of the little sin simulator, and just want to get the story working, but instead have to trudge through various alleys to trigger random interactions to get those story bits moving. It doesn't happen a great deal, but it does kick the pacing right in the nuts a couple times. Now, as you progress and take actions, you upgrade your characters via skill points you get and trade in at shrines, and those are separated by the genre, like adventuring or fighting and so forth, and there's a large number of them spread across the two protagonists. Also, to get better in battle, you have to invest in yourself, which might sound a little bit like someone suggesting you grab some Kleenex and a multi-tabbed browser and you spend some time alone. But all it really means is that the game has changed some of the combat system to feed off the cash you get when fighting. And I admit, the first time I punched somebody in the Jimmy Makers and a bunch of cash rolled out, I felt like Dana White watching his little underpaid fighters getting lasting brain damage so he could buy another vowel in a sentence he was trying to speak. It was fantastic, and it absolutely increases the fun here. Money just leaks from fools and flies around. It's hilarious. You smash someone's face into the earth with an uppercut sent from somewhere around Alaska, and you watch money shoot out of their open holes. And it never gets old. It gets odd, yes, but it never gets old. Now you take that cash, you buy more upgrades for battle, and you continue on. It's like the world's saddest game of soul pinatas without the life sentences for busting them open. Now the best part about it, though, is that both characters have their own styles, and these styles of fighting interact with the world and their nomenclature perfectly. Each does something unique, and none of them are like the other, including my favorite, which basically has the block button make you stand in place and just let fuckers punch you, because nothing really is scarier than a dude who not only says bring it, but does so with weird magical auras flicking around him. It's just amazing stuff, and while it does lack the finesse of fighting systems in other games and some of the wildness of the titles prior, it's all the stronger for it, I think, with the gameplay here. And there's a lot of substantial stuff, and while the main game and its mechanics are a proper list of battle, exploration, upgrading, and story, the minigames have to be mentioned separate because, man, they're just fantastic. And yes, they're not perfect, but they're almost fully fleshed out, giving you this very lived-in feel where you're trotting through the main story's gameplay mechanics only to find side mechanics that, when explored, unlock more side options and more side mechanics, and even more from then on out. And for a large number of those, there are side skills. And there's just a tremendous number of these activities, and many people may say, shouldn't this son of a bitch be, trying to solve the problem at hand? And yeah, sure, that's true. But who doesn't like to go bowling, have a late night dance off, and then top that off with trying to get a date in an era where you couldn't just swipe sideways? But for the most part, it's not a detriment to the game, and it's not something that you have to do. That's the magic here. While it does have some pacing issues, it still doles out incredible amounts of varied gameplay. Much more so than I think you will think upon first inspection. And to me, that's certainly one of the interesting things here. Yakuza barely takes 20 hours to finish, but its true gameplay really friggin' takes off about 10 hours into the game when you get the additional characters, start to really live the life of a Yakuza, and explore. And like so many other titles of its type, it takes probably quadruple that to max everything out and effectively 100% it. But unlike so many others, that time won't be spent in shallow side missions, but instead in engaging in a world with mini games effectively so robust, it feels like a place possibly worth exploring versus some transitory trips to the arcade just to play Space Harrier and then turn it off. Even though, let's be honest, I love Space Harrier, so that'll probably be me. Fun factor. Yeah, it's an absolute blast, and the first 10 hours is fun, but the later parts of this game are absolutely a joy. It has its issues, but few of them detract from the enjoyment. Now, that doesn't mean that if you just want to explore, you won't chomp at the bit during those story moments, but even with that sacrifice, the enjoyment here is fully fleshed out, little sections of land and quirky inhabitants, and amazing amounts of detailed clutter. It really is, without a doubt, like almost nothing else out there. Now, that being said, it had a couple issues that did sort of bother me when it comes to fun factor. First, the install from the disk is less than 6 gigs of 24 total. And the fact that nobody else in the review section has mentioned this blows my mind. It means if you try to enter into some places or perform some activities, you will be told that the game is downloading more data. The game also hung on me twice while trying to do this. Now, the game can take up to 5 to 10 minutes to finally instigate that second part of the download for the remaining 20 gigs. Please wait for that to happen. Downloading while playing the game seems to be abnormally slow, if not almost broken. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale. Absolutely a buy. This is a fantastic title, and it is a great time to jump into this Yakuza story because, frankly, this is the prequel, and it will just end up giving you an appreciation for the later titles. So anyway, that's it for me. If you guys like the video, give it a thumbs up. Maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. That is how I will continue to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.